Everyone also agrees that on December 4th, 2020, Mr. Goodson was armed with a loaded semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine. Throughout this case, you're going to hear evidence. You're going to see pictures, diagrams. You'll hear witness after witness after witness take the stand. And I want you to keep coming back to one piece of evidence. One question I want you to continue to ask yourself time and time and time again. After you've listened to 3 weeks of witness testimony, after you've seen photograph after photograph after photograph, after you've looked at the diagrams, ask yourself one question. Why did Jason do a U-turn in the middle of an intersection? And when you go to answer that question, when you link up that question with the evidence that you'll see, with the photographs, with the diagrams, with the witness testimony, the answer to that question will be the only answer that logic dictates. Because he saw Mr. Goodson point a gun. That's why Jason did the U-turn in the middle of the intersection. Now, Jason told investigators in his statement that he saw that semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine 4 separate times on December 4th, 2020. And before I get to walking you through those 4 separate times that he saw the gun on December 4th, 2020, I want to talk to you about what an extended magazine means. Because to a trained eye, to a law enforcement officer, an extended magazine is important and it's distinct for 2 reasons. Number 1, the person who has that extended magazine has made a deadly weapon deadlier because it has the capacity to hold more bullets and fire more rounds. That may not mean anything to me or you, but to a trained law enforcement officer, it means something. The second reason it's distinct, as Mr. Merkel demonstrated to you, because that extended magazine sticks out further than what a normal handgun would look like if you were holding it and pointing it at somebody. That extended magazine sticks out further, and law enforcement know that. Jason tells investigators that he saw that extended magazine in his written statement. He saw that extended magazine 4 separate times, and he's able to identify it because Mr. Goodson pointed it at him 2 out of those 4 times. So let's walk you through generally the 4 times where Mr. Goodson had a gun. This is the intersection of Carl and Ferris. It's just an overview of Google image map, certainly not from December 4th of 2020. But to give you an idea of where we're at in the city, there's an intersection, Carl and Ferris. Now, none of these cars are the same colors, but I made them brighter so that you guys can easily identify them. The blue represents Jason Meade, and the orange represents the Nissan Versa that was driven by Mr. Goodson. Mr. Meade is stopped at that intersection as he sees Mr. Goodson approaching that intersection. What do we do when we're stopped at an intersection? We observe. We look around. Jason has a clear view of oncoming traffic to his right and oncoming traffic to his left. He's seated in a Ford F-150 that's got a higher vantage point so he can see into the cars as they are coming and as they are going.
Stephen, you may want to take that thing down so the jurors can see the
I apologize.
on the easel.
Oh.
No, she's not ready to show that.
Oh, he said take it down.
So the jurors
I
can see.
apologize. Thank you so much, Judge. Can you folks see that okay? Thank you. is a witness, Chris Korn, who Mr. Merkel told you you'll hear from, and I'll show you the video. Pay attention to that video as Mr. Korn pulls up to that intersection, because he really doesn't stop. And Mr. Korn will tell you that it's possible that Jason saw something he didn't see. Jason's got a clear view of that intersection at Carl and Ferris Road. Behind Chris Korn is in fact Officer Rosser. Officer Rosser was a teammate of Jason's and had just finished the warrant work with Jason on that day. So as Jason is at the front of the intersection observing what is going on, he sees something to the right that catches his eye. He sees the driver of this Nissan Versa making erratic movements with his hand. He sees this driver point and pump this semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine at other motorists on the road. Jason's looking around. He sees another car drive past Mr. Goodson, coming from the left. He sees this car drive past Mr. Goodson and sees the driver, Mr. Goodson, who we all now know to be Mr. Goodson. He sees the driver pointing and tracking this firearm at this driver of this pink vehicle. It wasn't a pink vehicle on that day, but for our purposes today, it's that pink vehicle. Jason sees that. The driver drives right by Mr. Goodson, who again points his gun. Jason is observing all of this. What does he do when he's observing all of this? He radios to his team. Now, Mr. Merkel didn't read for you what it was that Jason Meade told investigators that he said on the radio that day. But what he said was, hey guys, if you're still here, we got a guy waving a gun here at the intersection of Carl Road. That's what he's trained to do. Radio in a crime as it's being committed. That's what Jason tells investigators that he radioed on December 4th, 2020. Then Jason says, at that time, the individual turned left onto Ferris, and as he did, he pointed the gun directly at me. So there the individual is turning left onto Ferris. Again, pulls right by Jason. Jason, again, is seated higher, can look down into this car. He sees the gun point at him. He immediately ducks and gets out of the line of fire. Then he recalls Aaron, and this is, again, in his statement that he told to investigators. I recalled Aaron, he's pointing a gun at everyone out here. He's coming at you now, Ryan. Now, Mr. Merkel, in his opening statement, made it a big deal that Ryan Rosser didn't know what was going on. And Mr. Merkel wants to impute that fault onto Jason, who radioed to his team everything that was occurring. What you didn't hear Mr. Merkel tell you was that Jason's team lead radioed back, Dave Youngless, and you'll hear from Dave Youngless. He radios back and tells the entire So Fast team who was out on that operation that day to go back to Jason's location, to back Jason up. The car proceeds after the gun being pointed at Jason, proceeds down Ferris and turns onto Estates Place. Why did Jason make the U-turn immediately? Because he saw a gun. So Jason turns and makes that U-turn. He then stops at Ryan Rosser's car to tell Rosser and reiterate what he says on the radio. It's just a brief pause, but he nevertheless pauses and tells him, there's the guy with the gun, let's go. Then Ryan proceeds to do the same U-turn. And they both follow Mr. Goodson. Unfortunately, this was captured by a school, St. Matthias. There's 2 cameras at the school capturing different angles. Here's a picture of one, and I'll zoom in for you. There's where one of the cameras are, and you'll get to go see where those cameras are. When we take our jury view, pay attention to where those cameras are. Pay attention to what the intersection looks like. Look around the intersection. Observe what is going on there. And there's the second camera that captures a different angle on Estates Place. Now, I'm about to play the video for you of what took place at Carl and Ferris Road. Here's the position of camera 1. You'll see Jason's truck approaching the intersection. You'll see Mr. Korn's van approaching the intersection. And you'll see Ryan Rosser's truck approaching the intersection. You see Mr. Goodson make a U-turn, and Jason immediately makes that U-turn. Why would Jason make a U-turn if he did not see a gun? Ryan Rosser then makes that same U-turn. Now this is a zoomed in portion of that same video I told you, or I just showed you. There's Jason's truck approaching the intersection. There's cars going by Jason. He stopped at that intersection. He sees Casey. Mr. Korn, pay attention, doesn't stop, still not stopped. Jason immediately makes that U-turn. Why would he make a U-turn if he did not see a gun? You'll see Mr. Rosser make that same kind of U-turn. He has to back up, but nevertheless, he goes in the same direction. Now here's the position of camera 2. It will show Mr. Goodson coming onto the screen and turning right down Estates Place. This is all happening quickly. You'll see 15 seconds goes by when Jason's truck comes on the screen, and Rosser is 15 seconds behind him. So we just went through the first 2 times that Jason saw the semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine. The 3rd time, Jason is searching for the man with the gun. He loses sight of him. He knows this is dangerous. He then sees sight of him on Estates Place, the street that he had just left on. The car is parked illegally facing oncoming traffic. Jason knows that's dangerous. So he sees that car parked, and he realizes, oh my God, this guy's got a gun. I don't have my vest on. I don't have anything to protect myself. I know this person has a gun, and I need protection. So he stops at the intersection of Sale and Estates, puts his gear on. His gear is easily identifiable as United States Marshals, grabs his service rifle. As he's doing that, Ryan Rosser pulls up. As Ryan Rosser is pulling up, along with Joseph Yorkowitz in the same vehicle, he sees the driver get out of the car. Bag in his left hand, semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine in his right. Now in hindsight, 2020, we find out that Mr. Goodson is right-handed. How would Jason know that he was right-handed if he did not see that gun in his right hand? As that is occurring, Ryan Rosser is pulling up. Jason tells him, there's the guy with the gun. There he is. The guy with the gun looks at Jason and takes off running toward a house. He ducks behind a house and goes around this corner, ducks into the fence, Jason hops in his truck, goes down Estates Place, gets out of his truck, is identifying himself as a United States Marshal, telling lawful commands to drop the weapon. And the fourth time Jason sees that semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine is when Mr. Goodson, for whatever reason, makes a slight turn and points the gun at Jason. Jason is equipped with his service rifle. He sees the deadly threat, and he responds to the deadly threat with deadly force, as he was trained to do. He fired, pulled the trigger one time. One time did Jason pull the trigger on December 4th of 2020. Those are the 4 times that Jason saw the gun. Now the facts are simple, and so is our defense. Our defense will require you to answer 2 questions. Question 1, when he saw Mr. Goodson point the gun at him. And question 2, was Jason's decision to use deadly force reasonable through the eyes of a reasonable police officer standing in Jason's shoes without 20/20 hindsight? And I give you those 2 questions because that's what the law requires. That's what we must prove by a feather more than 50%. We must prove to you, more likely than not, that Jason believed he was about to be shot when he saw the gun be pointed at him, and 2, that his decision to respond to a deadly threat with deadly force was reasonable, based on the perspective of a reasonable police officer, not with 20/20 hindsight. And so I tell you those 2 questions because that is what the law requires. But don't take it from me, take it from Judge Young, who will tell you that that's what the law requires. That the perspective here is that of a reasonable police officer on the scene. And it's important for you to know that because the instructions that the judge is going to give you will not tell you to look at Mr. Goodson's perspective. They will not tell you to think about, why would Mr. Goodson point a gun? The law that the judge is going to give you tells you not to look at Casey Goodson's perspective, but rather the perspective of a reasonable police officer standing in Jason Meade's shoes on December 4th, 2020, experiencing what he experienced. So let me walk you through what Jason Meade experienced on December 4th, 2020. Before I do that, the government wants to make this case about AirPods and a CCW permit. And I must caution you, because those AirPods and that CCW permit are from the perspective of Mr. Goodson. What didn't Mr. Merkel tell you about those AirPods? That they are not noise cancellation. That Mr. Goodson had his hood up, skull cap on. What didn't Mr. Merkel tell you about those AirPods? That Jason Meade did not see them. He was completely devoid of what it was that Mr. Meade saw, and more importantly, what he didn't see. And what the law requires is the perspective of a reasonable police officer in Jason Meade's shoes. It's illegal to drive with AirPods in your ear. Now the CCW permit that they want to make this case about, again, I must caution you. Again, because that's from the perspective of Mr. Goodson. There is no reasonable police officer who will take the stand and testify that the behavior that was observed by Mr. Meade on that day is consistent with CCW training. There is no officer who will take the stand and tell you that that's what a CCW permit class teaches and trains you on. There is no officer, and officers know what a CCW permit training class looks like. There is no officer who will tell you that it's okay for a CCW permit holder to be dangerous in a car with a gun. There is no officer who will tell you that it is legal for a CCW permit holder to point a gun at people in a roadway. A photo of Mr. Goodson in a car. You can see the headrest pointing a gun while he's in the driver's side seat. I'm not saying that was from December 4th of 2020, but what we are saying is that this behavior that Jason Meade saw, the same behavior that Jason Meade saw on December 4th of 2020 is not the behavior of a lawful CCW permit holder. And neither is this. And neither was the time that Mr. Goodson put his finger on the trigger and fired his weapon in his grandmother's house after he obtained his CCW permit. They didn't tell you that. Sure, he was allowed to carry a concealed weapon on December 4th, 2020. But that CCW permit does not give you the ability to point it at people on the road. Now, taking you back to December 4th, 2020, in Jason Meade's shoes. You are on a task force with the United States Marshals. Your assignment, so fast. A dangerous task force that is tasked with apprehending dangerous fugitives, people who are good at hiding from justice. So you hunt, you search for those people. Your warrant work is done for the day, and it's time for lunch. So you get in your truck, and you pull off of Estates Place, and you're stopped at the light of Carl and Ferris. You're stopped in the front of the light, so again, like we talked about, you can see oncoming traffic from both sides. Seated in a Ford F-150, so you're higher than everybody else on the road. You are a trained eye, observing everything around you. Something catches your attention to the right. See a Nissan Versa. The driver has a handgun that he's pumping and pointing at different people on the road. You see a car approach that Nissan Versa. Then you see the driver of that Nissan Versa point the gun at that driver. That driver continues to make that left turn. He pauses for a second to let oncoming traffic clear, but he continues to make that left turn. He's turning while he's pointing a gun, and then he points the gun at you. You duck to get out of the way, and immediately get on the radio to your team what it is that you are seeing. Hey, I got a guy out here with a gun on Carl and Ferris. He's pointing the gun at everyone. You are a police officer. You have just seen multiple crimes be committed. You have a duty to investigate. You're like, what is going on here? This is dangerous. You know guns are a problem in the city of Columbus. You know drive-by shootings are a problem in the city of Columbus in the year 2020. You know that an extended magazine makes an already deadly weapon even more deadly. You tell your teammates. The team lead, Dave Youngless, gets on the radio, tells the other teammates to back you up. You're not going to make up something. You're not going to lie to your teammates. You know how dangerous that can be if you lie to your teammates or you make something up to your teammates who are then going to approach a man with a weapon. You give them your location, you know your team is en route. You know your backup is coming. So you do a U-turn in the middle of an intersection. Why do you do a U-turn in the middle of an intersection unless you saw a gun? There's a school and a church around. You're in a residential neighborhood. You lose sight of him. This is becoming more dangerous. You see your teammate Ryan Rosser and you pause at his truck to reiterate what you had just told Ryan on the radio. There's the guy with the gun, let's go. Ryan Rosser makes that same U-turn. You see the driver all the way down at the end of the street on Estates Place. He's parked illegally, facing oncoming traffic. You know, again, this is dangerous. You don't know whose house he's parked in front of. You see him parked on the opposite side of the road, and while you don't know whose house he's parked in front of, you do know one thing for certain. And that one thing for certain is that that man has in his possession a semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine. You know that, but you realize you don't have any of your own protection as you approach. So you stop at the intersection of Sale and Estates. You put your vest on, your vest that is clearly identifiable as United States Marshals. You grab your service rifle that the division issued you. You have to protect yourself. As that is occurring, Ryan Rosser and Joseph Yorkowitz are pulling up. You're telling them, hey there, he's down there, he's down there. The driver of the Nissan Versa gets out of the car. You tell investigators he had a plastic bag in his left hand. In his right hand, he saw the semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine. That driver looks at you and takes off running toward that house. You tell Ryan, there's the guy with the gun, let's go. You hop in your truck, you fly down the street, this is emergent. You think something is about to happen. You see the driver of that car, who's now out of the car, running and ducking into a fence. He's trying to get into a house. You approach the house and say, drop the weapon, United States Marshals. You give him several commands. Right after you give him those commands, instead of dropping the weapon, Mr. Goodson, for whatever reason, we will never know, turns and points the gun at you. You fire your service rifle one time. One trigger pull, as you are trained to do, as you are trained to respond to a deadly threat. You defend yourself. You have the right to protect yourself. At that moment, when the gun is pointed at you, you have to protect yourself. Now, this is all happening very quickly. Jason does an immediate U-turn. Why? Because he saw the gun. 15 seconds after, he's following Mr. Goodson. 15 seconds after that, Ryan Rosser is following Mr. Goodson, and then it's all over. It took me longer to tell you what happened than it did in real time. Think about that as you're deliberating. Now, how are we going to be able to prove that Jason was in fact justified in using deadly force? As the judge will tell you, deadly force may be used if the officer reasonably believes that such force is necessary to defend himself from the imminent threat of death or serious physical harm. Again, we have to prove that to you a feather more than 50%. So how are we gonna prove that Jason believed he was about to be shot when he saw Mr. Goodson point the gun at him? Well, Jason wrote a statement to investigators you're gonna hear about. That statement from the investigators says, "I thought I was gonna be shot when he pointed the gun at me. I was in fear for my life." Everyone agrees that when a gun is pointed at you, you're afraid. Everyone agrees that a gun is a deadly threat. But how are you going to be able to judge whether Jason's actions were in fact reasonable in the eyes of a reasonable police officer standing in Jason's shoes? Every police officer who takes this stand is going to tell you how they are trained to deal with deadly threats. Again, there is no doubt that a gun is deadly. That when they see a gun pointed at them, the law permits them to defend themselves. They do not have to wait to be shot at in order to protect themselves. And that makes sense because neither do you or I. And I'm not a police officer who puts my life on the line every single day. You just heard the government belabor 6 shots in the back. I think Mr. Merkel was kind enough to number those shots for you. But listen, as the coroner will tell you, you can't tell what order the shots came in. Every police officer who takes the stand will tell you that even a person facing away from you can still be a deadly threat if the person turns and points the gun. Every single police officer who takes the stand is going to tell you that. Why? Because in a split second, a person can make that slight turn and point that gun at you. What they didn't tell you, what Mr. Merkel did not tell you, is that those 6 shots in the back are in fact consistent with what Jason tells investigators. You'll recall an activity.
Excuse me, Your Honor. We approach.
Good night. You may continue.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. You'll recall an activity that Mr. Collins had you participate in with the laser pointer. The coroner is going to testify that the wounds Mr. Goodson received are consistent, even though they are through the back with someone and turning. That the wounds are consistent, even though they are from the back with what Jason tells investigators. That's what the coroner is going to testify to. That is what the evidence will show. You're going to hear about studies on how quickly a person is able to turn. Pay attention to those studies. The judge is going to tell you how to judge the reasonableness. That it must be judged through the perspective of a reasonable police officer on the scene, standing in Jason's shoes, not with 20/20 hindsight. Those jury instructions won't tell you, look at cover, look at concealment, look at what Mr. Meade should have done, or could have done, or would have done. There will be no Monday morning quarterbacking that goes on in this case. He is going to tell you that the determination of reasonableness must allow for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second decisions in circumstances that are often rapidly evolving, tense, and uncertain. I hate to break it to the government, but if it were me or it were you, the judge would not give you that instruction. That instruction that the calculus of reasonableness must take into the fact that police officers are forced to deal in circumstances that are rapidly evolving, tense, and uncertain, are specific and is special to police officers. That is the law here we're dealing with, as the judge will tell you. The evidence will show that's exactly what we have here. A situation that is rapidly evolving, that it is tense, and it is uncertain. But the evidence will show that one thing was for certain, that Mr. Goodson had a semi-automatic handgun with an extended magazine. How do we know that is for certain? Because it was recovered on the scene. We know that the evidence will show one thing for certain, that had he not seen the gun, he would not have fired. You're going to hear expert testimony. You're going to hear it from a real life expert who has been in law enforcement longer than I've been alive. His name is Jim Scanlon. He's going to walk you through why Jason's decision to use deadly force is reasonable and in accordance with nationally accepted police practices. Jim was on SWAT. He's trained both nationally and internationally. But most importantly, he was a police officer here in this state. He knows Ohio's laws. He went through Ohio's police academy. You'll hear from the state's so-called expert too. He's a man by the name of Seth Stoughton, who's maybe been a police officer for 5 years and certainly never certified in this state to enforce the laws. In fact, he'll come in this courtroom and tell you that he doesn't even know the laws here in Ohio. Pay attention as you listen to that, as we point that out when you're evaluating these expert witnesses on what it means to be a reasonable use of deadly force. You're going to hear the accounts that I just gave you is corroborated. What Jason says to investigators that happened that day isn't just what Jason said. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen. The evidence will show that that statement is corroborated by physical evidence, by witness testimony. The state's own witnesses are going to tell you and corroborate what it is that I just told you what happened. You'll hear from Ryan Rosser. He was second in the door with Jason. He's approaching rapidly behind Jason. Now, Mr. Merkel told you that Ryan Rosser is going to say that he heard shots before he heard commands. Pay attention, ladies and gentlemen, to Ryan Rosser's statement. He's going to take the stand and he is going to tell you that's not what happened. He's going to tell you that he heard commands to drop the gun and then he heard the shots. You'll hear him tell you where they located the gun on Mr. Goodson's person, right underneath Mr. Goodson, as soon as they approached and he was in the entrance of that doorway. You'll hear from Joseph Yorkowitz, another team member. He was third in the door with Jason. You'll hear how he was terrified. He had never been on something like this before. But most importantly, You'll hear Joseph Yorkowitz tell you and corroborate what it is that Jason tells investigators, because Joseph Yorkowitz is going to tell you that the driver of the Nissan Versa runs as fast as any human can run toward a house that we didn't know who lived in there. You'll hear from a neighbor, whether her testimony from a prior hearing is read or whether she is live and in the flesh on that witness stand. You'll hear from the neighbor who we have to call, and that neighbor corroborates the same thing Jason tells investigators and the same thing Rosser will tell you, that she heard commands, that she heard him identify himself as a law enforcement officer, and then she heard the shots. Why doesn't the government want you to hear that information? Well, because she too corroborates independently what Jason tells investigators. You'll see physical evidence that confirms what Jason says. Of course, he didn't know that St. Matthias had 2 working cameras. He tells investigators he did a U-turn. You saw that U-turn on that camera. He hadn't watched the videos. He stopped at Rosser's car. That is confirmed. Why did he do that U-turn? Because he saw Mr. Goodson pointing a gun. You will hear from a biomechanics expert, Dr. DeMullen. He studies human movement for a living. He does a shooting reconstruction. And he will explain to you that the trajectories are consistent with what Jason tells investigators happened. That the most likely position, not talking more likely than not, that the most likely position of Mr. Goodson was outside that door, exactly as Jason describes to investigators. You'll see pictures of an empty right-handed holster buried underneath clothing. Underwear, shorts, jeans, a t-shirt, a hoodie. Look at the holster. The holster has no blood on it because it was buried under layers of clothing. You'll see a photo of the gun that was recovered on Mr. Goodson. That gun has blood on it because it wasn't buried by the layers of clothing. It wasn't in the holster, as the evidence will show. You will hear multiple first responders tell you where the gun was when they approached Mr. Goodson. You will hear that there's physical evidence consistent with what Jason tells the investigators, in that Mr. Merkel told you that Jason tells investigators he was inside the gate. He doesn't tell investigators that he was inside the gate. He tells investigators, I stopped a few feet outside the gate. Why don't they want you to know that? Because there's physical evidence of the ejected bullets, the casings from the bullets that are found outside the gate. You will hear from a gun expert who will tell you about the ejection pattern of Meade's service rifle, of Jason's service rifle, that when they eject, they come out to the right. And they are found outside of the gate, which again is consistent with what Jason tells investigators. Again, the coroner. You're going to hear that the coroner is going to testify that the wounds are consistent with what Jason tells investigators. But the government doesn't tell you all of this. Why not? Why doesn't the government want you to know that the coroner is going to say these things? Well, the evidence will show that it doesn't align with their theory. You're going to see photos, and they are hard to look at. At the end of this trial, the question will not be whether Mr. Goodson's death was tragic. It was We know it was. Now, Mr. Merkel spent a lot of time talking about he was going in the house with a gun, which is what Jason says on a body-worn camera. But again, what Mr. Merkel didn't tell you, as you'll see for yourselves on the video when they play that body-worn camera, what he didn't tell you was the question that Jason was responding to. How did I miss the call? What he didn't tell you was that Jason was doing a million things at once, and you will see him doing a million things at once, trying to direct the medics, trying to make sure a path was cleared for the medics so that they could safely and securely get into the home, answering questions of a million different people, trying to keep the family at bay. You will see that on body-worn camera. You'll see the statement that he writes to investigators. Jason is a Marine, a law enforcement officer, a trained eye. When duty calls for service, when a crime is being committed, he responds as he has been trained to do. And in that process of responding to a crime, he is allowed to defend himself. The evidence will show that had he not seen that semi-automatic handgun, he never would have fired. I told you that December 4th, 2020 was a rapidly evolving day. It was tense. It was uncertain. But the one thing that was for certain on December 4th, 2020 was that Jason saw Mr. Goodson point a gun. Point a gun at the intersection of Carl and Ferris. He saw the gun with the extended magazine while he was at the intersection of Sale and Estates. He saw Mr. Goodson look at him and take off into a house. And he saw the gun be pointed at him as Mr. Goodson, for whatever reason, turned and pointed that gun at Jason. In response to the deadly threat, Jason fired his service rifle one time, as the evidence will show that the law permits him to do. The evidence will show that Jason was dealing with an armed person who did not drop the gun and, for whatever reason, pointed the gun at Jason. At the end of trial, we will have met our burden because we will have shown you by a preponderance of the evidence, a featherweight more than 50%, that Jason believed he was about to be shot on December 4th, 2020. And we will have proven to you by a preponderance of the evidence, a featherweight more than 50%, that his decision to respond to a deadly threat with deadly force was in fact reasonable, standing in the shoes of Jason Meade from the eyes of a reasonable police officer, from the perspective of a reasonable police officer standing in Jason's shoes as he experienced everything on December 4th of 2020. Because the evidence will show that an immediate threat to the officer or others of serious physical harm or death will permit him to respond with deadly force, the evidence will show that Jason Meade was justified, a justified tragedy. As such, at the end of the trial, my partner, Mr. Collins, will come before you and ask that you find the only verdict that justice demands here. And that is that Jason Meade is not guilty of both counts. I thank you for your time.